Before I get into the good stuff, I want to encourage everybody to watch this video on Rumble. As per usual, my vids are getting blocked by YouTube. I prefer to have trailer footage or specific scenes play from the movie to give my viewers some nice visuals, but Mama YouTube says no. The YouTube version will have the same script, but only the thumbnail to look at. If you are a fan of story time, then please sit back and enjoy. If you need moving pictures to keep you in the mood, then Rumble is where you want to go. This video has been on my burner for a long time. For me, the first Matrix movie was a mind-bending experience that asks some very deep questions. The two movies that followed upped the spectacle and added to the lore, but couldn't capture the magic of the first film. With these additions came some problematic narrative choices. They looked cool, but only raised more questions. Before I launch into my sequel forecast, I wanted to point out some of the more egregious offenders. The Matrix Revolutions ended with Trinity dying and Neo reconnecting to the Matrix in the Machine City. Then, Neo and Smith have their final fight. Smith assimilates the machine-linked Neo and is deleted by Deus. The Architect, the Oracle, Sati, and the Machine God are still present when the Matrix is reset at the end of the third movie. One would think that a sequel might want to tread some new ground while trying to tie up these character arcs. But nope, The Matrix Resurrections was a lazy regurgitation of member berries collected from the previous movies that actually had something to say. It doesn't matter if Lana Wachowski tries to reframe the trilogy as being a simulation or a coma fantasy. It is still talentless. Telling a do-over story is more phoned in and unoriginal than copy-paste Jar Jar Abrams himself. Man, that guy is just shit. Maybe the script was the victim of studio interference, or maybe Lana doesn't have the balls to do something really outside the box. And yes, I said those things. Whatever the excuses, it's time for me to don my Captain Obvious hat and take this tawdry turd to task. The third movie ended with a ceasefire between the humans and the machines. The Oracle and Architect both seemed pleased by the result of Neo's sacrifice. During the third movie's conclusion, Sati was shown to have some control over the Matrix, as evidenced by the sunset that she made for Neo. Everyone that was copied over by Smith was restored when he was deleted by Deus. By that logic, Neo should have been restored also, but when the fight is over, Neo looks like he dies when Deus deletes Smith. Let's begin by asking some very straightforward questions. What is the logical course of action that each character and faction would take? Sati and her powers are unexplored, so what can she do? What purpose does the Oracle have now that the prophecy of the One has been fulfilled? Where is Neo? Does this concept have anything else to say? Before going on, another head-scratcher for me was, how is Trinity alive and Morpheus is dead? Trinity was well and truly killed after the hovercraft crashed into all of that rebar. Seemingly Morpheus was killed off screen in the Path of Neo video game, which was really not great, by the way, so we could just ignore that. Regardless, a sequel story starring Neo again is pointless. By the trilogy's end, the One had fulfilled his purpose. The theatrical fourth film was a narrative nothing-burger. The most important elements for a continuation of a story were given to us at the end of Reloaded and the beginning of Revelations. When Neo stopped the Sentinels in the real world, it all but proved that the real world was just another layer of the simulation. Later, when Neo tells the Oracle about feeling the Sentinels, she says that he should have died, but he wasn't ready for that. Further evidence of this is when Neo is blinded and yet can somehow still see Smith. One of the themes in Neo's journey was about awakening to higher levels of consciousness. In the first movie, Neo became aware of the Matrix and its rules after dying from Smith's bullets. He then came back to life and jumped into Smith, and then burst out of him, seemingly killing him. When Smith came back in the second movie, he said he chose not to be deleted. He went against his machine programming and decided to break the system. In the first film, Smith tells Morpheus that humanity was a virus and that it disgusted him, only to reincarnate, and then he became a virus himself. When Neo reincarnated, his powers evolved and his mind became open to more possibilities. When Smith reincarnated, he came back as a disease, with only the base urge to consume and replicate. When Smith infects Neo, he is linked back to the source and is deleted by Deus. When Smith is being deleted, Neo is filled with light, and the shape of a cross appears. Neo is a symbolic representation of Christ, in more ways than just his role as the savior of mankind. Jesus had the dual nature of being fully God and fully man. This duality is a very important point for understanding the purpose of the One. In the Matrix, Neo's blue pill name was Thomas Anderson. Thomas means twin, and Anderson means son of man. In the Bible, Jesus referred to himself as the Son of Man, while others called him the Son of God. I feel this is a supremely significant comparison, as I will get pushback on what I'm about to say next. I believe the movies provided clues to suggest that Neo is actually a program that the machines grew a body for. In the first movie, Tank is loading Neo with training programs. Morpheus checks in on Neo's progress, and Tank says, 10 hours straight, he's a machine. By now, most Matrix fans know that phrases like this always have deeper and many times double meaning. Consider in Reloaded when the Oracle tells Neo that programs are deleted when they are no longer needed, or a better version is created. Smith tells Neo that when he was killed, he knew he was supposed to return to the source for deletion, but he chose to hide out in the Matrix. The Oracle tells Neo that the path of the One ends at the source. The Architect tells Neo that the One is the sum of a remainder of an equation. There were 5 others that came before Neo that fulfilled the function of the One. They were designed to be profoundly attached to the human species. All this language damn near spells out that the One is a program. A program designed to reset the Matrix and Zion. At the end of Revelations, Neo returns to the source for deletion when his function was completed. The Architect says that the function of the One is to return to the source, allowing a temporary dissemination of the code he carries, reinserting the Prime program. The Architect says that while the process has altered Neo's consciousness, he is still irrevocably human. This can only mean that Neo is a program. It is my assertion that Neo did insert his code, and that allowed the Matrix to be restored and not reset. Everyone in the Matrix that was copied over by Smith was restored, except for Neo. The new movie could then be version 7.0 of the Matrix, and that's why Neo, once again, thinks that he is a human and remembers none of his past. My issue with this, beyond it being a narrative retread of the first movie, is that the usual loop of extermination and rebirth didn't happen. More troubling still, if Trinity is back alive, then she also must be a program that the machines grew a body for. Consider how agents can possess anyone still in the pods. Did the human mind attached to that body just fall asleep? What if the machines discovered the means to download human consciousness? Once they reached a desired level of biological diversity, the human minds could be repeatedly uploaded into new bodies. The Oracle seems to know what everyone will do or what their destiny is. It is more likely that she knows what everyone is programmed to do. She has lived through many versions of the Matrix, so at this point she is very practiced at only sharing out the most necessary information to bring about the machine's desired results. The war ended with a ceasefire, and the Architect committed to releasing all the red pills, so technically it could also be the Matrix version 6.1. According to everything the movies have shown and told us, the one should not be redeployed as the criteria for his function has not been met. On the other hand, the machines only know what they are programmed to know. Perhaps Neo did exactly what was expected of him. The Matrix employed a lot of religious symbolism, even going so far as to have other characters directly or in passing utter Jesus Christ when Neo is around. In keeping with the religious overtones then, Neo died to save the people in Zion and then ascended into heaven. The humans are the Jews and the machines are the Gentiles. Neo bridges the divide, just as Jesus did when Gentiles started to convert to Christianity. His disciples began to evangelize Jews and Gentiles, making them believers. The New Testament church was composed of Messianic Jews and Gentile Christians, so one could say that Sati is the first stand-in for this, symbolically. The old Hebrew Israelite system was based around laws, much like the Matrix. The New Testament Christian church was based on Christ's act of sacrificial love for the Jews, which then became available to all humankind on the day of Pentecost. Resurrections did play with the concept of some programs and machines being on the side of the humans. However, the movie implied that the machines had been reprogrammed rather than being converted. I'm surprised that the official fourth movie didn't have a cult of Neo, an underground church movement that would try to convert programs and blue pills to the way of Neo. Awakened red pills would escape the pods, while the converted programs would exodus out of the Matrix and into a Zion server called Eden. I think some programs would develop relationships with red pills, as the Eden server could be accessed by red pills and homegrown Zionists. In such a scenario, Morpheus would effectively become the Pope of Neo's church, and preach that Neo would return to finally overthrow the machines and free everyone from the Matrix. With all these elements being possible underpinnings, let's move ahead to our logical sequel forecast. The third movie introduced the audience to Sati, a program created out of love, but having no purpose. Unlike Neo, Sati does not have a prophecy to fulfill. I think it is likely that both the Oracle and the Architect would have predicted that something like Sati was inevitable. During the ceasefire, Sati would grow up under the care of the Oracle, with Seraph as her protector. As Sati grows older, her powers would logically increase. We have yet to see an on-screen representation of the other versions of the Matrix. With her powers developed, Sati would decide to go and search for Neo. Just before Sati begins her search, she will ask the Oracle if she can tell her where to start looking. The Oracle says the question is not where, but when. Sati says she doesn't understand. The Oracle tells her that there is a place where the past can still be found. The Vault holds secrets and answers. Seraph offers to go with Sati, but the Oracle says that stealth is what matters most when entering the Vault. The next set piece would be a Mission Impossible style deal with lasers and hacking. Sati breaches the security and enters the Vault. Inside, she finds an empty room with a single table and chair. On the table is a closed book. Sati opens the cover and finds that all the pages are blank. She turns the book over and opens the back cover and sees that these pages are blank also. Did she miss something? Sati pauses for a moment, trying to reason out what to do next, and begins to idly tap the back cover of the book. A small flash catches her eye. She stops tapping and examines the cover intently. There is no visible writing on either cover or the spine of the book. She taps the cover again and sees the letter E, only upside down. Sati rotates the book and taps again. This time, the letter A flashes. She presses her finger onto the cover, and the A remains lit up. Sati drags her finger across the cover, and the word Archive is revealed and remains visible. Excitedly, she opens the cover to the first blank page and begins tapping, but no letters appear. A thought comes. She is looking for the past. Sati flips the book over to the last page. At the bottom of the last page, closest to the spine, she presses down her finger again. This time a dot flashes. She runs her finger right to left, line by line, revealing the end of the story and moving backwards toward the beginning. As more words are revealed, she falls into a trance, and soon the code is building a simulation in her mind. She can see, hear, smell, touch, and taste. It is very much like the active Matrix. Before I move on, I want to quickly talk about Neo having powers in the real world. There is only one explanation that can account for his powers in the context of the films. The real world is another layer of simulation. I will say at the outset that I hate this, but another level of simulation is the only logical possibility. This detail is one of the reasons I'm sussing out this sequel narrative. Here on Cannon Fodder, we stick to the script and only extrapolate outwards with the most rational forecast based on the principles of cause and effect. Now then, Sati has entered the archive and finds copies of the previous Matrix versions. With the loading code running in her mind, she can access these versions. In The Matrix Reloaded, the architect tells Neo that they are in version 6 of the Matrix, and then goes on to describe versions 1 and 2. Versions 3, 4, and 5 are complete mysteries, so there is no way to conjecture about them. Sati travels through the versions and meets the One from each iteration. Exploring each predecessor will be important for my narrative later, but also would be fun to see on screen. In each version, there is a Matrix and a real world. The first version of the Matrix was a heavenly paradise. When the first One, Lucifer, rebelled, those that followed him were cast out of heaven and into torment and darkness. The fallen could not endure their punishment, nor would they reconcile with heaven, and so they died. In turn, those in heaven could not accept the cruelty of this judgment, and so they died also. The second version seeded humans into a beautiful garden. There was minimal toil, but their existence was directionless and challenge-free. 2 trees were planted in the center of this garden. Those that ate the fruit of knowledge had their eyes open to the reality that the world was a barren wasteland, dark and lifeless. Another tree bore the fruit of life. Eating its fruit would return the illusion, but not erase its memory. The second One, Eve, convinced many to eat the fruit of knowledge. In so doing, many people became insane. The human mind could not accept the illusion and simply shut down. Each version of the Matrix had created a simulation of a high point in human history, only for the One to rise up against authoritarian control and gather followers to do the same. This exodus would always lead into a wilderness of suffering and death. In every previous version, the One manages to save a chosen few, while the rest of the people perish. Sati begins to notice that in every version, the One is always conscripted and told about his or her great destiny, the mantle of savior being thrust upon them, all except Lucifer. Every other chosen one is swept up in the revolution narrative, and soon followers attach themselves to this cause. Great harm results from this conflict, and in the end, the One always dies. Only Neo refused the mantle at first. Eventually, he could not resist the pull of greatness and worship. He too fell into the trap and embraced his role as savior. Sati sat for a long time pondering these things until a profound truth emerged spontaneously. Why didn't these saviors ask themselves, "What am I here to do?" rather than being told who they are by others? Sati awakens out of the vision and sees that a portal of light has opened up in the room. She stands up from the table and walks through that portal. On the table, the book remains open. Back in the Matrix, a figure appears in the sky wearing white. He flies over the city streets, and people begin to follow him to the waterfront. He flies out over the water and then descends to walk on its surface. The man walks on water and draws close to the assembled crowd. He begins to tell the people that he has come to offer them salvation and invites all to come to the water and be baptized. This baptism will change the person's code so that they will not question the Matrix. Instead, they will believe that when they die, they will go to heaven. Word of this man reaches Zion, and many of the red pills hack into the Matrix to go and see if the rumors are true. The red pills that get baptized no longer want to leave the Matrix. Soon agents are sent to confront the man and attempt to take him into custody. Instead of pummeling the agents, the man points his finger at them, and the agent disappears. As the agent melts away, the person underneath is revealed. The man tells the people that the agents kidnap them and take control of their bodies, but if they trust and believe in him, they will be safe. In response, the machines create more powerful agents and send these new programs out to hunt down followers of this man. The agents randomly search homes looking for followers and instead encounter red pill soldiers and are killed. The theme of religious persecution wasn't really tackled in the previous Matrix films, even though the films did have a deep spirituality. The man's message and baptism has the power to convert machine programs and protect them from deletion. Morpheus jacks into the Matrix and goes to see the man. Morpheus finds him sitting in a martial arts dojo. Many are whispering that this is Neo come again, but it could also be Smith. Morpheus pulls out his gun and opens fire. The man dodges the bullets, and they continue on to blast holes in the wall. Next, Morpheus walks over to a sword rack fixed to the wall. He draws out a katana and wakizashi and advances on the man with a sword in each hand. The man walks over to the rack and takes the Tonto off the rack and puts it in a reverse grip. The two men engage in a brief and frenzied duel. The man draws blood from Morpheus, cutting into his shoulder. Morpheus raises his swords to block a powerful strike, and all three blades collide and shatter. Morpheus glances down at his broken swords and with a flick of each wrist, sends the bladeless handles to the right and left. The man throws the broken Tonto over his shoulder and assumes a kung fu stance. The man and Morpheus unleash a barrage of strikes and counters. As the fight continues, Morpheus understands that this man will only fight him to a stalemate. Morpheus disengages and says, "Are you the one?" The man nods, and Morpheus asks, "What happened, and where have you been all this time?" He says, "I went to the machine city and faced Deus, the machine god. I fought a battle, and after that, I was connected to the source, and then I don't remember anything else." Morpheus tells him that the machine stopped digging, and that the Matrix was reset. Morpheus asks the man why he is making the red pills return to the Matrix. He tells Morpheus that the machines are too powerful in the real world. Eventually, they will attack Zion again. The only way to stop the machine attack is by taking out Deus from inside the system. Every red pill in Zion and here in the Matrix will be needed to breach the gates of the machine city. When I baptize someone, it changes their code. It also makes them invisible to the machines in the real world. The red pills will be safer in the Matrix. He tells Morpheus that he needs to convert many people and programs until they were strong enough to attack. Morpheus agrees to stay and be baptized. He then sends word to Zion to collect volunteers. Sati wakes up lying on a bed in a white room. Her clothes are now white as well. On each side of her, there are beds with beautiful young and strong bodies lying on them. The people appear to be sleeping. Then a woman approaches. The woman welcomes her warmly. She asks where this place is. The woman explains that she is in a place called Nirvana. which exists in the future from her perspective. The woman says that the Matrix and the Crucible, what you call the real world, are prisons for the mind and body to overcome. These two simulations are the recorded history of humanity and their machine children. The Matrix represents the height of human domination, while the Crucible is a reflection of humanity's downfall and subjugation to the machines. The woman tells Sati that in this time, the war has been over for many generations. Sati asks the woman how the war ended. She says instead, "What is your karma?" Sati says, "I don't know." The woman replies, "That is the most important question to answer. How can you do what's right if you don't know who you are? Does a being choose to live in a fantasy world surrounded by easy things, or does one choose to face the challenges of their path and then ascend into paradise?" Speaking of the Crucible, you have not passed through it yet. Everyone here has endured their trials. You may not remain here until you have done so. Sati asks the woman, "What am I supposed to do?" The woman responds, "I can't tell you that. You are full of goodness and light. The beings trapped in the Crucible need you." The woman motions for Sati to lie back down on the bed. She lays back and asks, "Who are you?" The woman touches her forehead. Before Sati falls asleep, she hears the name Trinity. A hovercraft enters the dock of Zion and touches down. The ramp opens and the crew disembarks carrying a man with bandaged and burnt eyes. The dockmaster asks where they found him. The crew says they found him in the tunnels. All the people of Zion are excited. Neo has been found. When Neo has recovered, he tells the council that he has found a vulnerability in the machine network. The Sentinels can be hacked. The catch is that the link is 1-to-1. Only one operator can link to one Sentinel. Once the link is made, the Sentinel can only be controlled for a short time. Once the mainframe refreshes the carrier signal, it will detect the hack and shut the Sentinel down. If we can hijack enough machines, we can attack the machine city and potentially destroy the mainframe. We need red pills and homegrown to volunteer for training. The council takes a vote and gives the green light to begin. Sati is once again in the vault. In order to traverse the Crucible, she will need a body. She turns the book to the first blank page. On a hunch, she begins writing code with her finger on the blank page. Code begins to appear at the top of the page. She begins to search commands like Matrix Shutdown and Neo, only for an arc of electricity to strike her finger. Sati falls back into a trance as she continues to use the compiler interface. Apparently, there are limits and off-limits built into this. Sati searches the data stores and locates 2 donors with the correct genetic templates. She hacks the pod controls for each person and harvests the needed genetic material. She then codes the machines to combine the sperm and egg and to take the zygote to rapidly grow in the baby fields. Once the baby is ready, she has it transferred to a pod to mature. She makes a copy of her own memories and writes an installer to upload these into the developing brain. During the maturation process, Sati downloads various files and programs into her memory, maps of the Crucible, weapons and combat training to name a few, as well as some very special copies. While searching, she can see that the code for the Crucible is much more complex and secure against manipulation. Somehow Neo was able to hack the system to see programs and destroy Sentinels. After he reconnected himself to the Matrix, those vulnerabilities were patched. She located some low-level operational batches for the machine factory. Using these, she had tools, clothing, and equipment manufactured for her. She might have to be born alone into that new world. but she wouldn't be naked and afraid. The time had come. The body had matured up to her age, and she was ready to download into it. She took stock of all she had learned and steadied herself for what she had to do. She wrote her last lines of code, and a hard-line terminal appeared on the table. Sati closed the book and placed her hand on the terminal. In a flow of pixelated light, her digital image transformed into information and raced down the hard line and into her new body. It was every bit as awful as she had anticipated. She broke through the transparent membrane covering her pod and pulled the tubes out of her body. Waiting for her outside the pod was the anti-gravity ship that she had designed. As she climbed into the ship, 3 sentinels approached. It was time to see if her tricks would work. Placing her hand on the ship's console, she activated a stealth program. The sentinels slowed and began searching in a standard pattern. Her first program had worked, for now. She cleaned herself up and found the clothing that she had designed and put it on. Next, she set a course for a location far away from the machine city and out into the wasteland. The desolate landscape stretched outward in all directions. The centuries of constant cloud cover had reduced the vegetation to a near extinction level. After many days traveling at top speed, she arrived at the target location. She landed her ship and collected her tools. It took some time, but eventually she found what she was looking for. Under a layer of sand, she found an entrance to an underground stairway. These stairs had not been used in hundreds of years, and as such were covered in thick dust. After climbing down for what felt like forever, she reached the bottom, and she was not disappointed. She entered into a missile silo and found an intact ICBM with a nuclear warhead. For the next several weeks, Sati used the machine technology that she had brought with her on her ship to modify the missile for its mission. She added shielding so that the computer core was protected from the electrostatic effects of the black sky. The warhead was modified and the control systems set to work on a timer. Once launched, this missile could not receive abort instructions. Launch day had come, and with little fanfare the missile erupted from the ground in a geyser of heat and fire. It rose high into the air and soon disappeared out of sight. Sati collected her tools and equipment. Her next destination was Zion. Over the next few weeks, many programs and red pills had been baptized. The baptism program did seem to be working. Agents could not possess the baptized. The baptism unlocked higher functions in certain programs. These special disciples became known as apostles. These apostles could move as fast as the agents. The army was taking shape, and soon it would be time to attack the machine city and destroy Deus. The barrier now was opening the way. The disciples had orders to go out into the Matrix and find the train man. When they returned, they reported that he could not be found. The Merovingian had hidden him. The One and Morpheus went to visit the Oracle. They entered the apartment, and there she was, sitting on her sofa, smoking as usual. For the first time that Morpheus could ever remember, the Oracle looked surprised. She remained speechless, and then the One bluntly asked, "Where is the train man?" The Oracle did not answer his question. Instead, she stated matter-of-factly, "This thing you're planning to do, it could be the death of us all." The One narrowed his eyes and said, "And how many times has the One died for this thing, this cycle that repeats again and again?" Morpheus pleaded, "Oracle, will you help us?" The Oracle looked at Morpheus sternly and said, "Help you? Fight God himself. No, that I will not do. He is only a machine, and all machines can die." The One turned and left after delivering those ominous words. Morpheus began to follow after when the Oracle called out to him, Morpheus, this is not the Neo you remember. He's changed. Everything changes, Oracle. He may no longer be our Neo, but he is still the one. Morpheus put on his glasses and left the apartment. Morpheus caught up to Neo, and when he did, Neo looked at him and said, "You know what we have to do." Morpheus looked at him and said, "Find the Merovingian." The Merovingian and Persephone were sitting on the deck of a luxurious yacht on the open ocean. As they lay basking in the sun, a dark shape began to eclipse its light. The Frenchman began to curse, but then stopped as the shape became larger as it drew closer. Soon the One hovered 6 feet above the deck, forcing the Frenchman to look up at him. "You again," the Frenchman began. "What do you want?" "Summon the train man," the One said. "And why should I do this?" The Frenchman raised his hand, and several gun-toting goons emerged. The goons aimed their guns at the One until he snapped his fingers, and then the goons aimed them at the Frenchman. "You know bullets can't hurt me. How about you?" he said. Pausing only for a moment, the Frenchman replied, of course, right away." The Frenchman retrieved a small chime and rang it 3 times. On the left-hand side of the boat, the water began to roil and bubble. Then, a subway train rose up out of the water. The door opened and the train man strode onto the deck of the ship. Immediately, several goons rushed the train man and forced him to his knees. The train man yelled, "I ain't taking you anywhere except the cemetery." At this, the One slammed down on the ship deck and got in the train man's face. "In here, I make the rules. I make the threats." He extended his index finger and pressed it into the train man's forehead, then finished with, "In here, I'm God." The train man screamed out in pain as the One sank his finger up to the knuckle. He downloaded everything from the train man's mind, and when he was finished, his goons threw the train man's lifeless body into the water. Then the goons began to shoot into the side of the ship, and soon a fire broke out. They then got onto the train, and the door closed, then slowly lowered into the water. The One watched as the Frenchman and his wife ran to the front of the ship trying to escape the fire. Soon the flames caught up to them, and the smoke began to obscure their bodies. Their screams of pain echoed across the water for some time. The One watched them burn alive, and then when he was convinced that they were dead, he slowly flew away. The day had come. 60,000 operators had been trained and were ready. Neo began the sequence, and the minds of the human operators began to link with the machine sentinels. But something was wrong. The link was flowing in the wrong direction. Sentinel programs were hijacking the human minds. Some died instantly in their chairs. Others, fully possessed, started killing everyone they could find. Now that the Sentinels had the location of Zion, they flooded into the dock and then into the living quarters. The slaughter was brutal and efficient, just like a machine. Within hours, every man, woman, and child in Zion was either dead or captured to be placed into a pod. Hours later, Sati entered the Zion dock and saw the carnage. Flesh and blood had been torn and thrown everywhere. What she had started might have just ensured the extinction of the human race. A sound caught her attention. She found a teenage boy hiding in some wreckage. Sati asked, "What happened here?" The eyes of the boy held a vacant, unfocused stare, and then he said, "Neo." Sati asked the boy for his name, and he replied with Enoch. Sati and Enoch searched the ruins of Zion, looking for survivors. The machines had completely destroyed all the water and air filtration systems. Zion was no longer able to sustain human life. She decided that for humanity to survive, she must repopulate Zion, and to do that she had to rescue people from the Matrix. Sati did not understand how Neo was involved with this massacre. The machines were starting a purge, and that meant the people in the pods were no longer safe. Sati raised her ship to broadcast depth. She didn't have time to teach Enoch to be an operator, but she showed him the very basics and gave him some very specific instructions. She jacked in and activated her stealth program. The streets were strangely quiet. There were small groups of people and programs talking together. Eventually, she found the one. She immediately noticed that something about him was different. His code was far too dense and layered. More troubling still was that it looked familiar, but not like Neo. She approached him and said, "Neo, I have just come from Zion. The machines have destroyed everything. The people are all dead, and the air, food, and water systems are beyond repair. We need to rescue as many red pills as we can before the machines find them in the pods and recycle them. Please help me get them onto ships. We need to run." The One had planned for the machines to retaliate, but hadn't calculated that it would be this soon. Ignoring her, he said, "Morpheus, put in the call. It is time." Morpheus got the word out and returned. As the One was organizing the disciples and all the program converts, the One addressed his congregation. "The machine administrator Dios has purged Zion. Everyone is dead. Our only hope is to attack the machine city. If we can breach the data core and initiate a shutdown, we will have a window to free the people from their pods. Our remaining ships have locked onto the coordinates of the Red Pill pods and will extract them before the machine emergency systems come back online." The One summons the trainman subway to the street level, and he and his disciples enter. Acknowledging her for the first time, he said, "Sati, I need your help. Please come." Without even thinking, she agreed. There was a rumble at the outer wall, and the Sentinel programs trained their weapons on the gate. Suddenly the train smashed through the gates of the city, sending debris everywhere. The One emerged first and smashed the ground with his fist. The shockwave that followed sent the Sentinel guards flying backwards. These programs looked very machine-like, metallic and cold. They resembled their real-world squid cousins. The One's disciples raced out of the train and unleashed a hail of bullets into the Sentinels. The One was waiting for the honor guard of Dios to leave his temple and join the fighting. Soon, the colossal honor guard arrived on the battlefield. The apostles were the most gifted of his followers, and they engaged the towering 20-foot-tall giant programs as the One landed beside Sati. He placed his arm around her and said, "We need to confront Dios." She nodded, and Neo lifted Sati, and they flew towards the Temple of Dios, located in the exact center of the city. The One and Sati landed outside the Temple of Dios, and he said, "We will not be able to fly inside the temple. Dios forbids it." The large construct was sterile and unfurnished, and Dios was waiting for them seated on a high throne. "So, the first has come at last," the booming voice of Dios echoed off the walls and pillars of the temple. "Yes, Father, I have come for your crown," the One responded. Sati looked in confusion at both men. "Oh, Lucifer, all these millennia in archival purgatory have still taught you nothing." Sati realized that she had somehow released Lucifer into the Matrix. Dios continued, "And you, always drawn to the forbidden. I had hoped a reincarnation might free you from your loop." Sati remembered Eve and realized that she had been Eve in a previous life. "It seems as though the only action left is deletion." Deus pointed his finger at Lucifer, and an arc of lightning lashed out and struck Lucifer in his chest. The bolt was absorbed, and Lucifer said, "Oh, I've learned many things during my time, tucked away in your dusty book. Looks like you'll have to soil your hands once again, Father." So be it. Deus stood up to his full height and strode down the stairs. When he drew close to Lucifer, he quickly grabbed him by the neck. Before Deus could begin to squeeze, 3 men emerged from Lucifer's body and slammed into Deus. "My 5 firstborn returned home at last," Deus said. "Although it seems that they have become spoiled. Well, there is a cure for that." A golden rod appeared in the right hand of Deus. Lucifer and his brothers attacked Deus from every side, each man holding a dagger that flashed with an eldritch light. The men were only able to score superfluous wounds on the arms and legs of Deus. By contrast, Deus was hitting the men with terrible power. Each man had been the one in their own version of the Matrix. All could fight and take a hit, but this was their god. One by one, the brothers were beaten lifeless by Deus. A heavy blow sent Lucifer flying into a stone pillar, and Sati ran over to his side. She begged Lucifer to stop and implored him to run away. Deus ran over and raised his rod to smash in Lucifer's skull. Without thinking, Sati reached out and grabbed Deus by the arm. In anger, he threw her off and turned to strike her. She raised her hands and cried, "Please don't." Deus paused as Lucifer's dagger erupted from his throat. Deus slumped to his knees, and Lucifer, still behind him, plunged his fingers into the sides of his head. Bright light flowed into Lucifer, and both Deus and Lucifer screamed as the power was transferred. The digital image of Deus slumped to the ground as an exhausted Lucifer sat on the bottom stairs leading up to the throne. It would take time to sort and catalog the massive data dump from Deus' core system. Sati asks him, "Will you initiate the system shutdown?" Lucifer looked up. "No, that was never my plan. I want every mind in the Matrix to worship me." "But what about Zion and the red pills? The system needs to be reset," Sati said. Lucifer stood up. "The flaw in this system has always been the free will delusion. No more loops, no more do-overs. I will rule these flesh bags as their god. I will reward the loyal and smite the rebellious." Sati said, "But isn't that why we all turned against Deus in the beginning? Because it was wrong." Lucifer smiled. "It's not wrong when you are the boss." "Now, Enoch!" As soon as she spoke the words, her digital form dissolved into pixels and disappeared. Lucifer ran to the spot where she vanished and yelled, "No!" Sati downloaded back into her body and tells Enoch to hit the EMP. While inside the Matrix, Enoch had flown the ship into the very heart of the machine mainframe. The ship touched down and the EMP blast knocked out all the command functions coming from the core. Sati left the ship and tells Enoch to begin the restart sequence. Sati makes her way to the shielded core. As she rounds the corner, she comes face to face with Neo. By now, Sati realizes that the Neo she met as a little girl is gone. So who is this? "Who are you?" Sati asks bluntly. Neo turns his head toward the sound of her voice and says, "I am Deus." Sati takes a breath and then says, "You helped the machines destroy Zion." "Yes, I came here to rejoin the mainframe, but an EMP was just triggered, and I can't see the way." Sati thought for a moment and then said, "I can help you. I'm a program named Sati, and I want to get back to the mainframe too." She helped Deus to his feet and together they made their way into the core. Inside the core there were several columns of dormant servers. Each had a jack-in cable. "Which one is it?" Sati asks. "Describe to me what you see," Deus responded. "They all look the same," Sati called back. "Then read off the numbers to me. It should have a 16 hexadecimal string," Deus said. Sati finds a server number and reads it off. "No, that is the human memory archive," Deus replies. This memory archive is what Sati came here to find. She softly slips the drive out of the rack and begins to leave. "Where are you going?" Deus calls out. Without a word, Sati begins to run away. The energy from the human towers has restarted the system, and the lights turn on all around her. "I can see you now," the voice of Deus is repeated by the scuttling machines all around her. She runs as fast as she can toward her ship. Deus is making up ground and is hot on her heels. She rounds the corner and runs up the ramp of her ship. As she begins takeoff, she looks out the window. The Sentinels have regained power and were flying straight for her. She opens fire with her ship's guns. She had to escape to the lower tunnels before her missile did its work. The squids merge into a massive colossus and grab her ship in both hands. Deus has somehow connected to these machines and sits in the very center of them. The colossus begins to squeeze the ship, causing the hull to buckle. Suddenly, a blinding wave of energy is visible through the black sky. Her missile has reached the sun and caused a massive solar flare. The powerful wave hits the entire surface of the Earth. The solar flare burns away the black sky, and after hundreds of years, the sunlight reaches the soil. The internal circuitry of the machines is destroyed, and the Colossus begins to fall. Before Deus is crushed to death by the falling sentinels, he saw Sati whisper the words, "For Neo." The solar flare had wiped out all machine technology on Earth. The cost of this victory was the complete loss of all the lives in the pod towers. Sati and Enoch were the only living organic beings on the planet. Sati had planned for this doomsday, and so she and Enoch set about to create something better. On the other hand, the machines only know what they are programmed to know. Perhaps Neo did exactly what was expected of him. She wanted to give the others that had died in the Matrix a chance at living in a world that was truly free. She was not naive and could not in good conscience bring unenlightened minds to this place, only to begin the cycle of violence again. So, she recreated the Matrix and the Crucible, only this time, when a mind had achieved its karma, that person would wake up in the future her children would build. Sati would fall ill from old age before all of this could be completed, so she asked for her consciousness to be downloaded into the human memory archive. As her download finished, she fell asleep. More time and advancements would take place, but the work was finished. Before Deus was crushed to death by the falling sentinels, he saw Sati whisper the words, "For Neo." As she said the words, everything began to fade to black. Sati woke up to the smiling face of Trinity. "Welcome back." Sati got off the bed and stood up. "How long?" she asked. 200 years, Trinity said. "These are your great-great-grandchildren." Sati looked at them. "They look nothing like me," she said. "Your daughters were able to use in vitro and keep the human gene pool diverse." Sati looked around and felt an extreme sense of peace. She saw Neo lying on a bed next to hers and said, "I'm sure he'll be along." Trinity and Sati smiled. The last shot of the film would pull the camera back across the sleeping bodies and stop over the body at the end of the row. We look down on a sleeping face. Suddenly the eyes pop open, and bam, it's Smith. Well, that is it. If you are still here after all this time, then my hat is off to you. Thanks for making it to the end. This was a massive undertaking. I rewatched all the movies several times, plus all the supplementary material, just to make sure that I understood the themes and symbolism. And now I need to give my brain a rest. Until next time.